Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's just dive right into this. I want you to imagine just for a second that the Earth operates like this massive universal bank account. But instead of holding dollars or euros, this vault is packed with the fundamental assets that make life possible. We're all born with a shared inheritance from this incredible planetary trust fund. So today we're going to look really closely at our natural resources through this exact lens. We'll examine what we've actually got in the vault, how fast we're spending it, and most importantly, what we need to do to balance the books.
And that brings us to a rather urgent question, right? What actually happens when Earth's bank account just runs dry? We're constantly drawing down on our planetary assets to fuel our cars, build our sprawling cities, and feed our rapidly growing populations. But unlike your regular bank account, we can't just call up the universe and ask for a credit extension when we run out. Today's explainer is all about truly understanding our resource consumption before we hit absolute zero. So first things first, what exactly makes up an asset in this Earth account of ours? Well, a natural resource is officially defined as any material that can be transformed into a more valuable and useful product or service. Now, the absolute key word in that definition is transformed. See, nature provides the raw materials like soil, wind, minerals, but it's almost always human technology that unlocks their true utility. For instance, mineral oil just sat beneath the Earth's crust for centuries, completely untouched, until we developed the specific technology to convert it into the fuel that powers our entire modern world. To manage our wealth properly, we really have to recognize that we're dealing with two very different types of accounts here. First up, we have renewable resources. Think of these as a high-yield savings account. Actually, scratch that. It's better than a savings account because it constantly generates its own interest. Resources like solar energy, wind, and forest cover can be naturally renewed even after we use them. On the flip side, we have non-renewable resources. And these are strictly finite. Fossil fuels and minerals took thousands, sometimes literally millions of years to form under highly specific climatic conditions. If we exploit these recklessly, they're gone. There's no quick refill. So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to audit 4 major portfolios in our planetary bank: forests, water, minerals, and food and energy. Let's get right into our living sanctuaries. Section 2, Forests, the Living Sanctuaries. A huge part of the Earth's lithosphere is covered with these incredible centers of biodiversity. Let me tell you, forests are easily some of the hardest working assets we have. Just look at their job description. They do so much more than just provide us with timber. They act like these giant natural sponges, protecting our entire watersheds, filtering impurities right out of our groundwater, and totally preventing flash floods. They control local climates by physically cooling the air. Crucially, they perform carbon sequestration, absorbing carbon dioxide, which is a leading greenhouse gas, and releasing fresh oxygen. And of course, the whole shebang provides food, medicines, and economic livelihoods for millions of people. It is the ultimate multitasking resource. But, and it's a big but, we are heavily overdrafting this account through deforestation. All over the world, forests are being rapidly cleared for agriculture, grazing cattle, and massive commercial logging. To put this depletion into perspective, India alone loses about 15 lakh hectares of good forest land every single year. That sheer volume of loss, it's estimated to be roughly equivalent to the country's entire total consumption of oil, coal, and electricity combined. It's wild. When we lose the forest, we don't just lose the wood, we lose the watershed protection, the carbon absorption, and all that vital biodiversity. Section 3. Water, the elixir of life. We constantly call Earth the watery planet, right? Because it's about 70% covered in the stuff. But the reality is a striking and honestly somewhat alarming contrast. 97.39% of our water is locked up in the oceans. It's completely saline and totally unsuitable for human consumption. Another 2.01% is locked away frozen solid in glaciers and polar ice caps. That leaves an incredibly, unbelievably thin slice of the pie for the water we actually depend on for our day-to-day survival. So, the absolutely crucial point is this. Less than 1% of the Earth's total water is available as fresh water flowing in our rivers, lakes, streams, and groundwater. Less than 1%. Almost all of humanity, along with literally all terrestrial plant and animal life, relies on this tiny fraction of a percent. When you look at it this way, it's pretty easy to see why overexploitation, water pollution, and wasteful practices, like, just leaving municipal taps running, are so incredibly dangerous to our collective survival. Section 4. Earth's building blocks, minerals. Okay, let's shift our focus from flowing assets to extracted wealth. Because minerals are non-renewable natural substances formed over millions of years, physically drawing them from our planetary bank account is a highly calculated mechanical process. Step 1 is prospecting, which is simply hunting for the mineral. If we're lucky enough to find it, we move to exploration to assess its size and actual economic worth. Then comes development, where we prepare the site, and finally, exploitation, the actual extraction from the earth using either open cast or deep shaft mining methods. But making this withdrawal comes with some seriously hefty transaction fees. The environmental costs of mining are severe. The process itself generates massive amounts of waste, which directly causes heavy soil and water pollution. It leads to severe land erosion, where fine soil particles are just washed away and deposited elsewhere, causing massive sedimentation issues. On top of that, mining frequently occurs in forested areas, leading to heavy damage to our forest cover. And the sheer amount of dust generated in the process contributes significantly to severe air pollution and respiratory problems. We get the minerals, sure, but the environment absolutely pays the price. Interestingly, though, these assets aren't distributed evenly across the globe at all. Take a look at this statistic. About 25% of the world's known mineral reserves are found in India alone. The country is essentially this massive storehouse of economically useful minerals, from iron and bauxite to precious gems. It really highlights how highly concentrated global wealth can be, and how heavily certain specific regions bear the ecological burden of global resource extraction. Section 5, Food and Energy Resources. Now we come to the resources that literally sustain the human machine. With a world's population projected to reach 12 billion in less than 50 years, the drain on these specific accounts is honestly staggering. Ensuring everyone is fed, what we formally call food security, isn't just about growing more wheat and rice. It actually requires 3 distinct pillars to be perfectly balanced. First up, availability. We actually have to physically produce enough food for the entire population. Second, accessibility. People must have the buying power and the economic freedom to purchase that food. And third, adequacy. The food being consumed actually has to meet our basic nutritional requirements. If any one of these pillars falls, starvation and malnutrition quickly take hold. This brings us to a rather stark warning from the source material. Listen to this. When global biological and physical limits to domestic food production are reached, food import will no longer be a viable option. The crucial point to take away here is that we often just assume international trade is this perfect insurance policy against food shortages, right? We assume rich economies can just buy their way out of a local crisis. But money literally cannot buy food if the Earth's physical capacity to grow it is entirely exhausted across the board. Which brings us to the energy that actually powers all this production. 90%. That is a massive number. That is the proportion of our present-day energy consumption that is still based entirely on depleting, non-renewable sources. 90% of the world's energy relies on burning fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, and natural gas. And not only are we rapidly exhausting these strictly finite deposits, but burning them produces the carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxides that are literally suffocating our atmosphere. So to stop this massive energy overdraft, we absolutely must shift our reliance toward non-exhaustible streams. We need to tap into renewable energy alternatives and do it fast. This means harnessing the enormous nuclear fusion happening right inside the sun for solar energy. It means generating heat from biomass, utilizing the kinetic power of wind and rushing water, and safely harnessing nuclear power. These aren't just alternatives anymore. These are the sustainable currencies of the future. Section 6. The bottom line. Sustainable development. So, after all that, how do we actually balance the books of our planetary bank account? Well, the ultimate goal is crystal clear: sustainable development. This simply means meeting our needs today without bankrupting the planet for the generations that follow us. It's all about maintaining a really delicate balance. It acknowledges that, yes, human development and economic growth are going to continue, but it insists that this growth cannot come at the cost of irreversibly ruining the environment for the people who will inherit the Earth after we're gone. So what's the game plan? How do we balance the books? Based on everything we've explored today, the actionable steps are pretty clear. We must aggressively conserve and reduce our excessive use of those finite resources. We must completely shift away from a throwaway culture to one that relentlessly recycles and reuses materials. We absolutely must transition our power grids heavily toward renewable energy sources like solar and wind. And, for sure, we must protect our most precious liquid asset by managing watersheds effectively, preventing pollution, and stopping the absolute senseless wastage of our fresh water. All right, let's move to our final slide here. We all hold a stake in this planetary bank account, Every single time we turn on a light, buy a new product, or just leave a tap running, we are actively making a withdrawal. The resources are vast, absolutely, but as we've clearly seen today, they are far from infinite. So I'm going to leave you with this one thought to chew on. How will you manage your share of the Earth's wealth? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.